Hello, Hope Unlocked listeners. Did you know I offer coaching? New Wings Coaching empowers women to rise up with new wings in their calling, communication, and connections through coaching, courses, and community. To hear more, please email me at Kristin, Kristin, Kurtz, Kurtz, at new, New Wings, Wings, coaching, coaching.net. And mention Hope Unlocked to hear more about the discounted rate just for my Hope Unlocked listeners. I also have a Facebook group called Women of Wonder Warriors Arise. Just check out the show notes for the link to access the group, and you can also access the show notes for my email address as well. Enjoy today's show.
Hi, and welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I am Amy Hirsch, and I'm taking over hosting duties today for your regular host, Kristin Kurtz, because she has an incredible story that needs to be unlocked and unleashed. And I'm so happy to be here to help her do that today. Thanks so much for asking me to join you today to unlock a story, Kristin, that I know is going to help so many other people get unlocked and healed up from the things that bind them.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. I love your voice. I love the ways that he has created you to also unlock others through how you share, the ways that you pull out questions, and the ways that you have walked out your obedience the last couple of years as well. Like, it's been such a fun, quote unquote, wild journey adventure to travel this path with you, right?
Yeah, I know. The Lord definitely has us all on a journey, and a lot of it has to do with kind of unleashing who he originally created us to be. And that's what I love about your story, Kristin, is your story has so many twists and turns. You are, if there's one thing I think about when I think about you, Kristin Kurtz, is that you are an overcomer. You've overcome so much in your life. And I love that you just don't take that and go. You turn back to grab other women and help them get unlocked too. And so I can't wait for you to share your story today. Let's just get into it, because I don't want to waste any time. We have a lot of ground to cover here today. So, Kristin, I know you have a heart and a passion for helping women really get healthy in mind, body, and spirit. I mean, your whole life, your coaching business, your podcast, it's all about helping women break free of chains. I think let's start with, I think what's really important to start with is that you once were in a time in your life where you were bound up in chains. And there was a moment really that you broke free and that radically transformed your life. So tell us about your early adulthood where you were bound up in the chains of addiction.
I mean, we go back, that's going back, it'll be 20 years in November that I got set free. And I like to say, I usually we use the word rescued, honestly. I was bound. I was basically in a cage of fear. I think that was the root trauma that carried through for many years, that I was just numbing. I didn't know how to even feel. I didn't want to feel. So rather than feeling, I would try to blot out, fear or anxiety or, what felt like massive depression at times. Even honestly, like as a young child, I felt suicidal at times, and things would compound. And I won't get into the whole story of the early years, but as an adult, when you kind of start tapping into things that help you feel better, whether it's food or sex or alcohol or drugs, for me, cigarettes. I mean, you could take all of those things for me. That was kind of around 15 was when all of those things just became very highlighted to me as ways to cope and numb. And, by God's grace, I look back and I actually used to call myself the designated drunk driver. I mean, who does that? I got a DWI when I was 20 and I still kept driving even after the fact. The fact that I didn't hurt anybody inadvertently or, get pregnant young or, other things, you could name all the things that he protected me from, even though I was not walking with him. I did not grow up in church.
Mm.
I actually thought God was detestable. I thought if there is a God, like there's no reason that he's really in existence because I wouldn't be walking through all of this then.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was rescued, literally completely delivered from drugs and alcohol. It's kind of unusual to have that kind of thing happen. I've had people ask me if I went to, like AA or Celebrate Recovery or, one of those things. But he literally, it was like, Saul on the road to Damascus. I like to say I had a Saul to Paul conversion. And my little tagline is thankfully I didn't kill anybody like he did.
Mhm.
Um,
Which is by the grace of God there
truly,
too.
truly.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many times that I look back now, in those moments of just, being behind the wheel or doing other things that, I mean, I can't even imagine if my kids did, you know, any of the things that I did back then. So he was watching, and it's interesting. Even though I didn't go to church or know really anything in the Bible or anything like that, I did at times feel like something was watching over me, especially on days I would get wake up from whatever happened the night before and go, wow, I'm still here. I tried the Russian roulette thing and it didn't work, so I knew that there was a reason I kept living. And I've always just been very tenacious too. So I guess that's part of, yeah, I guess that's a
How
big part
God made you.
of the rescue, right?
Yeah, I love that. You are tenacious, Kristin. You know, before he radically saved you, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that kind of rebelliousness was untamed. And I think once you got safe
Mhm.
in the arms of Jesus, man, that I love how he takes that kind of rebel in you
Mhm.
and uses it
Yeah.
for good, for his strength.
Mhm.
So, what do you think? So, tell us about what changed it all. You were going down a very destructive path with your life, really towards death.
Yeah.
What turned it around and made you walk towards life?
Yeah. I would say one of the big things was my youngest sister. Um, I was basically kind of, what's the word where you kind of distance yourself from your family? Well, basically, I did. I distanced myself from my family for many, many years. But my sister actually had come to me and kind of pursued me on and off, and I was just very, whatever, very like somebody you wouldn't necessarily want to pursue. You'd kind of want to give up on them because of the attitude, I guess you could say. But she's continued and pursued. I remember her asking if I would go to church with her. Now, the timing of her asking me if I would go to church with her came at a time where I literally, I feel like I hit that, the uh, rock bottom moment where the alcohol wasn't numbing anymore. It was actually making things worse. I was swirling. I felt this swirling and this oppression on me like I had never felt before. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't have people in my life that I could talk to about it. So when she asked me, something in me, like just this little flicker gave me the courage, I guess you could say, to say yes.
Wow.
Even though I literally thought every time I walked into a church to go to weddings that the place was going to burn down because I was so
Mm,
horrible. I would say that to friends.
mm,
So the fact that I was willing to go into a church was, but God, right? So I said yes. And unfortunately, the night before, I actually think it was, I recall it back to being like Halloween. And when you're in those, addictions, and at least for me, a holiday meant, oh my goodness, like you're going to go whip it up in greater ways. And so I ended up not going with her. And she ended up again asking, I think it was even that week, if I would go that next weekend. And I did go. I remember walking in and feeling a peace, and basically everything the pastor was talking about. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so weird. Like, how does he know what I need to hear right now? You know what I mean? Like, it was just like God had given a message that my heart needed to hear. And I just kept saying, this is so weird, but in a good way.
right.
Like, why are people happy here? Why are they singing? What is this? I don't understand. And it was shortly after. I don't have the date. I know it was in November of 2003 that there was basically an altar call, and I gave my life to Christ, and I knew at that moment that there was going to be a sacrifice in massive ways, but it was like, okay, I'm in it to win it with you, Lord. Like, this is not about, I can't live that life anymore. And I just remember it literally, like, I had no more desire for alcohol. I had no more desire for drugs. I quit smoking 2 packs a day, like, instantly. But the lingering thing, and I'll never forget my sister, was my trucker mouth. It took a little while. She was like, Kristin, now that you're a new creation, so I had to start kind of watching what was coming out of my mouth, because, that untamedness, that was probably one of the, the early indications of, what was still kind of in there, that was kind of untamed, like you were talking but it was huge. And I remember being so on fire, and going to get my husband a Bible, and he was like, no. So we won't get into that part of it too much, but that was
But
really,
obviously, yeah, the important thing is that the Lord did a radical work in you. Just the fact that he cut off those cravings.
mhm,
You went from craving, alcohol and cigarettes and drugs to craving him.
yeah, yeah,
And, you had this newfound health.
mhm,
You were sick, and now you're on a path to being healthy,
mhm,
mind, body, and spirit. And so I know you've said in the past, you kind of set out on a path. You were thinking you wanted to go into healthcare, but you weren't quite sure. I know
mhm,
you've told me in the past that you
yeah,
thought maybe nursing
yeah,
was for you, but you ended up in corporate healthcare.
mhm, yeah.
Um, and so, how did that begin? I'm sure you were very excited to be in healthcare.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us kind of how a little bit about how that path started for you
Yeah,
after you got free.
for sure. So, I would say I was on a path to going, to get my nursing, but I ended up, I actually had 2 miscarriages after I got saved, which is a whole other story. And my boys are miracles. I was told I couldn't have kids, but I ended up getting pregnant with Cameron, and I was really sick. So I had that, choice. Do I keep going and not do very well in school anymore? Or it was like, okay, I think I'm done here. Um, and, during that time, it was just like, if you've ever experienced something like this before, where you're technically not qualified for something, he started moving me into maybe more corporate type jobs rather than like, because I was waitressing and things like that where you typically would maybe work where you don't have maybe a degree or you're just not sure what you're doing, right? So I got kind of placed into a position, and then I got this stirring that I was done then, and back a door opened for me to work in the corporate side of healthcare. And yeah, I was absolutely excited because, it was a good salary. Basically like, hey, I'm definitely not on paper qualified, right? But I
Sure.
had some experience prior that kind of bolstered me into, getting that position. But the big thing for me, honestly, that was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be amazing," was the fact that the, health insurance was, like, basically nothing. All the benefits. I saw the benefits, and it would help our family financially and all the things there. Um, I was really excited when I started, and then as time went on, it's interesting, I would say there was probably about, um the first few years, I grinded it out
Mhm.
because I was in a place of still kind of this mentality of, you can sleep when you die, that kind of thing.
Sure. Like a performance
Yeah,
based.
for sure. You tell me to work overtime, I will do it, whatever you say, to help our family financially. Like I was all over that. I would, help out. I would help out all the time beyond what they would ask. And then things started shifting for me in 2017, 2018, where I started learning about this, grace over grind uh, thing. And I started having, again, more transformation in that area. But I also started to see just, uh, I guess you could say my eyes just started opening a lot during that time, even in essence, as a um, Christ follower. He started opening my eyes up in new ways prophetically. And I started seeing just a lot of oppression.
Mhm.
And I went from being excited to feeling like my wings were clipped and like I was in a cage. And also just seeing things and hearing things that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so wrong, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yes. So
yet I don't know what to do with it.
yes, right. So let's talk about that. So you're in corporate healthcare, you're in this realm of, you know, in this business where you're supposed to be making people well.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have this passion and this heart for helping people come through, what you've been through. And the pandemic hits in 2020,
Mhm. Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
start to see that this business
Mhm.
is not what you thought it was it?
No, no, not at all.
So what were you seeing from the corporate healthcare side that
Mhm.
really started to stir up and cause this almost strife in your spirit?
Yeah. I will go back to March 17th of 2020, and I remember being on our floor that I worked on. We had like a little break room type thing, and I heard pandemonic.
Mm,
Now the Lord often gives me wordsmith things, or kind of flip the script. And it was like one word, and I saw pan in little letters, and I saw demonic in big letters. And it
mm,
was really highlighted to me that what was coming down from leaders, in all spectrums, was not what they were making it out to be. So my eyes were like quickly, I would say, as things rolled out, I was very quick to discern lies
mhm.
from truth.
Mhm.
And what started to happen is there were things coming down the pipeline within the organization. Um, obviously seeing things out on social media, or, I'm not a big news watcher, but, you can't help but hear things and see things. And I was like, this is not what it is. This is not it. So there were definitely some times where we would get newsletters or be in meetings, and like my entire being was like, no, there are different ways to go about this. There are things being covered up right now. Um, and again, I just kept sensing that this was more about the money and also a very sinister agenda.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can see how, you with that passion for helping people
Mhm.
would really struggle with
Mhm.
something that really was flying in the face of that, which was
Mhm.
profits over people.
Yeah.
Is that what you experienced?
Oh, definitely. Um, I mean, there's so many different ways that I could go and share what I was seeing, and I think one of the biggest things that really rattled me um, was when there was a huge initiative um, that was to try to get pregnant women to get um, inoculated. We'll just use that word. Basically, the COVID vaccine. And I'm going to just say it, because if somebody wants to shut me down for saying that, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But, when things started rolling down the pipeline, and there was just so much manipulation, and um, that's what I kept seeing. It was just, go get, if you do this, we'll give you this. Or if you don't do this, you lose this. Right.
Mhm.
But like I said, one of the biggest things for me was when there was this huge initiative to try to convince pregnant women that they needed to get it, and that it was, safe and effective, which was, the two words that we heard a lot. I remember one day I was sitting outside and I was just crying. I'm like, this is not going to go well at all. And what we're seeing on the flip side now is, there are some statistics that I was on a recent health summit, and I think that there was a mention of around 400,000 spontaneous abortions from women who had the shot. And um, I just couldn't understand how a company would be just blatantly giving misinformation, and yet telling the people who were questioning it that they were the misinformation. You know what I mean?
Right. Because you were in that position where you were questioning it.
Yeah.
I know you went through your own battles within the company
Mhm.
because you decided to stand up and say, hold on a minute.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm not going to put something in my body, the body that the Lord entrusted to me and actually set me free from a life of death
Right.
into his life of
Mhm.
abundance.
Mhm.
You're like, whoa, hold up.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm not doing that without proper research and time. I'm protecting what the Lord has delivered, is how I see it. And
Yeah.
so you had to push back, and that was tough.
Yeah. It was it looking back now, I literally felt like I was on the front lines of a war. I mean, just the amount of I mean, it was almost like every day there would be these things shared, or words would come out, and I felt like it was almost like being in a battle and watching one of your friends, like, that had been like shot down. I felt that I felt it within myself because of how I just knew that people's eyes were being covered, and we know this is biblical. We hear the
Mm.
ears, just couldn't hear truth, right?
Mhm.
And my heart was just so grieved for those people who I'm kind of a burden bearer sometimes. I'll just say that.
So,
And as a feeler, like I could almost feel um, one of the biggest things that I was seeing, and I'll just kind of skip ahead a little bit here, but when he called me to really like speak up, because I'm a researcher as well, so I did start doing a lot of research. I found holistic, natural ways to even combat if you got sick. I was finding that there was like aborted fetal cell lines in the shot, and I'm like, no, thank you. Um, but I think one of the things that again, there was this time where everything just started really getting intense, where they were saying you either get this or you don't have a job, and that was where I started questioning quite a bit. And I'll never forget. And I always tell people, like, yes, we have on bumper stickers and t-shirts for such a time as this, but he called me to like go to the beginning of Esther 4:14, which is for if you remain silent, right? And I thought it interesting that he would take one that felt like Moses a lot to be the one that would help others, and in essence, like I heard this morning, journeying out of Egypt, right? Moses helped deliver many out of Egypt, right? So I
You
saw,
felt inadequate. I think that's the point that you're trying to make, correct? Like
yeah,
just
that's the
he
best way
said,
to,
why me? I feel inadequate. I can't speak, you know.
yeah, I stutter.
So I'm sure I can see how you felt like Moses in
Yeah,
that respect.
totally. I was like, okay, well, and then, I was just reminded of my grandpa from Norway and the ways that he stood up, and I felt this charge in me to like do the thing. And
Mm.
yeah, standing up. Well, since we were working from home, I would get on meetings and speak up and ask questions, because that's, as a coach, I'm trained to ask questions, but I've just always been one who's like, why? But why? But why?
It's that rebel in you again.
And I'll never forget, you guys, this is so funny. My manager's manager called me the but why girl. She would walk past me all the time, and she would just have this like sassy, like, but why? But why?
Mm.
So then I had to ask her a why question. It was always fun. Um, but yeah, I've always wanted to know the deeper meaning behind why we do what we do, or like why, if I'm working somewhere, okay, I'm doing this thing, but it's not making sense. So can you explain to me why we're doing this?
Mhm.
So anyways, I, would speak up on these calls, and I would have people, there would be people that would email or instant message or text and say, hey, thank you for speaking up. And my question to them was, what's keeping you from speaking up?
Mm.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, many were afraid of losing their jobs. They thought that they, basically would be put out on the street if they lost their jobs. And I was able to speak truth to them and ask them questions to help them, make an informed decision
Mhm.
on whether or not they were going to put something in their body that they, in essence, did not want to put in their body. I actually was calling it medical rape, honestly, the way that there was so much manipulation and force to do something against people's will, with a carrot of saying, you're not going to have a job. To
Mm.
me, that is like, it's just evil. Honestly, I think it's evil.
Sure. Well, and I think, looking back on your entire story, when you are delivered from a life where you're putting poison in your body,
Hmm. Yeah.
to not stand up and say, no
Mhm.
when you see that happening again, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
it's like, no, I'm free. I don't want to be recaged.
right. Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
free. And so all of a sudden you find yourself as a mouthpiece
Mhm.
in your corporate job. And there comes a time where I know it was confusing. Do I stay or should I go?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through kind of what your struggle during that time was? Because obviously you weren't unlike others where you needed a job, you needed that provision,
Mhm.
but there was something
Yeah.
bigger
Mhm.
that gave you the courage to speak up at a time when others were afraid.
Mhm. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I could say about that, just kind of this it was like this moment hit me that I clearly remember sitting outside and I remember Adam coming home from work and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I actually in March of 2021, I heard a go from the Lord that this time was going to be coming to a close soon.
Mhm.
I just didn't know how because my salary like was safe. It We had good benefits, all the things, and if I didn't have a job, it would not look good. Okay.
Mhm.
So um and once I said those words to Adam at a point where things were really hitting ahead, just so many things that I could go into that just were like, what in the world? And questioning, I finally got to a point where I was questioning even deeper and talking to HR, and they, basically were like, come on into the principal's office,
Well, you
Uh,
were being persecuted at work.
yeah. Yep. Yep. And my questions they did not like. So I just, was like, I can't do this anymore. And that came at a time where actually I had submitted. There was a way for people to put in like a medical exemption or a religious exemption. But
Mhm.
on the basically in the fine print, if you take time to read the fine print in some areas, there was no way to get a medical exception. Um, and there was actually, when you clicked on certain buttons, you're basically resigning yourself in some ways. And so I caught those things and put that into my because I did. I ended up submitting, and I actually didn't say this is a medical exemption. I actually wrote a 4-page uh, Word document that I attached to their online system, and I called it a medical or a religious declaration.
Mm.
So what I believed and what I was praying for was that whoever was reading it would actually get hit by Holy Spirit and awaken to what they were actually doing, right? I had legal things in there. I mean, there was no way that they could have said no with all of the things I provided. Um, but between the time that I was to wait for the 2 weeks that they made you wait to hear an answer, if you were good to stay or had to leave, um, I just said, to Adam, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. And he said, just quit. And I knew at that moment that was like it was almost like the chains on the cage were like
Mm.
completely obliterated.
Wow.
And I felt this like excitement in me. I felt like my wings like were starting to kind of unfurl a little bit, but there
Mm.
was still this like trepidation, like, oh my goodness, now like the cage door's open. Now what do I do? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
But I did well, kind of backing it up a little bit, I don't know if you remember, but Amy and myself and some other gals are in a messenger thread, and they ended up actually approving my my religious declaration. And on that day, I started questioning, going, okay, like I've got the go to go.
Mhm.
but can I really do this? Is this like, am I just thinking God's saying to go? Like, are we going to be okay? Um, and I remember asking you gals, like, I'm going for a walk, pulling a Gideon. I need a clear sign from the Lord that this is
Mm.
the best next step. And I'll never forget being on a walk. If any of you guys know me well, you know that I love eagles and basically things with wings. And as I was walking, there was a hawk that was flying like right over me, and I just felt like, wow, that's freedom, like being able to soar. And as I was continuing to walk on the path, great, I saw a hawk, right? Okay, that wasn't the sign that I was waiting for. But further down the road, I saw broken chains on the road. I still have them to this
Really?
day.
Gosh,
And
I had forgotten that's part of your story.
I knew, like, everything in me was like, I'm free. Like, and the next song that came on the playlist was about freedom and chains, broken chains. And it was this moment that I knew literally like the Lord was ushering me out of Egypt. Like it was an ushering. It wasn't even like, you can't even question this anymore. Um, and I put my 2 weeks in that day. And my last day was 11/1/21. And if you remember, we had, I've just, maybe it's the last couple few years, and I have a term now for it, but it's celebrate before the celebration. And I think it was maybe in September that I reached out to you guys. I'm like, let's have a pinata party. We'll just like release breakthrough over each other. So it was like a pre-planned releasing breakthrough, but the day that we did this was 2 days before I left the job,
Wow.
you know? So
Yeah.
it's kind of a long story.
Yeah. No, it's incredible how the Lord makes himself clear in those situations where he does set us free from situations like that. And but yet that doesn't mean that there's not fear or anxiety or, sometimes you don't have total clarity.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
out of obedience, you knew he was making it clear, okay, now's the time to go.
Hmm. Yeah.
And with that began your journey of, moving from being a fighter and a mouthpiece
Hmm.
for your, coworkers in this corporate healthcare setting
Hmm.
to this new assignment of being a mouthpiece
Hmm.
for helping others break free. Can you tell us about that time of transition when he moved you from the safe corporate job that was essentially, killing your spirit to now
Hmm.
you are, you know, being unleashed into this other area where you're finding yourself
Hmm.
speaking out?
Yeah. Yeah. It was like it was training ground, too. Like I look back on everything and I like to say it was not for naught, NAUGHT, right?
Hmm.
Um, so coming out of that, I've just always had this, set the captives free, kind of like what you were mentioning before.
Hmm.
Even when I was young, I just saw people. I see deeper in people, and I did establish my coaching business in 2017, but it wasn't, I wasn't able to put that in the forefront because I was working full time and just trying to keep myself as free as I could. In some ways, I was working with people, but as I got free from that cage, I like to call it kind of the cage of complacency,
Hmm.
because a lot of times, I started looking at the system. And one of the things he said when I left was cut the cord to the system.
Hmm.
So I started looking at the system. I started looking at, what do I love most about this business? And it is through coaching, is helping unlock women so that they can soar with new wings. That's his little tagline he's given me. And recently that I'm a flight attendant. I help women to truly come out of their cages and find the gold within to then do fully what it is that the Lord's called them to do. I would say like my heart cry, if I look at my heart cry and the women that I often see are these women that are in careers, are in jobs, are in corporate that really they aren't happy, but they feel like they need to stay to bolster their 401k so that they can be free when they're 65. Well, I don't think that's really his best for us if that's not what he's calling us to do. So I've had the beautiful privilege of helping, even some women who are still working right now that they want to be free from that.
Mhm.
He's given me like ideas, and even recently, a couple weeks ago, I was able to give. He just showed me she has two elements of what she's doing, and gave me a business idea for her to move forward with, and it like completely unlocked her. So these are the things that I couldn't do that. I could do it when I was working. I'm not saying that I couldn't operate in that place, but because of what I've walked through now and been released of it, like I know that it's possible, even if it looks impossible. It looks crazy and it looks stupid to everybody on the outside. Like what I'm doing makes no sense. I've had so many people, in the kindest, of ways, by no ill intent, say like because it's been hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to get into all the things, but it's been a very, very challenging journey.
Mhm.
And with no ill intent, well, just go get a job. It's like, but that's not what the Lord's calling me to. He's calling me to help set more women free, whether it's in their calling or their voice. But to kind of have this, I'm a mobilizer. So if I'm a mobilizer, I need to be mobile. I can't be in a cage,
Mm.
right?
Amen. Amen.
So there's that.
And I know you work tirelessly
Mhm.
to, complete that assignment.
Yeah.
Since you left healthcare, I
Mhm.
mean, you've done some surprising things that I know you thought you would never do. You
Yeah.
started your own podcast.
Yeah. That's probably
You,
one of the funniest
you
ones.
yeah, yes. I mean, again, it's that being the mouthpiece,
Mhm.
being that rebel that goes against the grain and
Mhm.
encouraging other women to see things differently, see success differently, really.
Yeah.
That, freedom, uh, I guess, takes precedent over the cages that we're in, when we're not happy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, tell us what you've been doing since you left that job and that you took a step out in faith.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, starting a podcast, like what? Who does Kristin? Um,
I love it.
I mean, it's everything that he's calling me to step into. There is a trepidatious, is that a word? Trepidatious. Yes.
Trepidation?
Sometimes.
Trepidation?
Trepidation. Yes. Trepidatious. I don't know. It's a fun word.
Mhm.
Um, especially this year, it's been a lot of, okay, we're just going to walk this thing out. Leaving, there's a lot of, leaving behind things that maybe I had started building up when, for example, I had a website last year, and who tears down their website shortly after leaving their job when you think that that's kind of part of your business, right? So it's just really being obedient and listening for what is next. In partnership with him, created a uh, program called 75 Whole, which is like the flip the script on the world's systematic program called 75 Hard. So that's been really cool to see, breakthrough that women can receive in that area. Cause I'm very passionate about holistic health, wholeness. And, I've had some group coaching that's gone on. I stepped into like a global movement with other women that, when we say yes to what he's calling us to, like we're not always going to see, we're not going to see the fruit right away. Right. I think I'll just kind of touch on this a little bit, but the world would have us to think that, impact is through big numbers,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
been telling me,
Numbers, follows,
right,
uh,
for
yeah,
people,
all of it. Likes. I mean, yeah, that's how the world seems to be defining success these days.
yeah, and or even just believing that if you could just touch one, like get around somebody that's super popular, that is
Mm.
like your claim to fame, if that makes sense, right?
Right.
Uh,
It's a way to leverage their popularity to gain something for yourself.
right, right. But what he keeps showing me, and I share this with a lot of people, and it's for the one, because one times one in the world is one, and I think that's where, if we look at common basic math, they're really one times one is just one, right?
Mhm.
That's not big numbers, but when he was showing me, it's like one times one in the kingdom is exponential, and I've experienced this in ways that we don't always get to hear the impact of the one. So, for example, if you're led to go to the grocery store and smile at somebody, well, what if that one person, was just having such a horrible day that day, that they were like suicidal and your smile like kept them alive?
Mm.
And the kids that, the generation beyond them, you don't know the beyond with the one. Um, so that's what I've been really focused on. It's been, like I said, it hasn't been a cakewalk by any means. I People have said, "Well, how are things going?" And I say, the appetizer version or the buffet version. But ultimately, it is a wild adventure, and I'm here for it. Like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of us that are willing to do the things that many aren't
Mhm.
willing to do. But in this particular season,
Mm.
it's been very challenging for many of us,
Mm.
whether it's finances or loss, just different things that are coming, but it's also drawing us closer to him.
Yes.
um, I think that there's a chasm that can happen. Either it draws you closer to him or it draws you farther away, and I think that's where the separation is happening right now in the
Mm.
body.
Yeah,
Right.
because I think when you truly yield your life
Hmm.
to God's plans, there is a death to self.
Hmm.
And I think before you can really be used by God, he needs you to hand him over
Hmm.
everything,
Hmm.
you know, all your expectations, your dreams, your vision, your, uh sometimes, your demands, your your agenda.
Yeah.
Um and that can be hard, but necessary.
Yeah.
And so, Kristen, when I look at you, I see a woman who is 100% yielded to the call in her life, someone who was radically set free,
Mhm.
really a miracle, and
Mhm.
has seen God's miracles in her life. And I just see someone who's sold out for Jesus, no matter the cost. And I'm just so proud of you. I'm honored to be your friend. I'm always encouraged when I talk to you. I see you endlessly cheerleading other women.
Mhm.
And I know that you are truly filled up when you're able to do that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I feel like you have, even though you have this rebellious piece to you, you also have a remarkable purity in heart,
Mhm.
that you truly, truly care for others. And you know, To whom the sun sets free is free indeed. And I see that in you. And I'm just so proud of you. I know this walk is not always easy. But I know as someone who's personally been encouraged by you, I'm grateful for you. I just encourage you to keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I thank you. I thank you, Kristin, for just being sold out and walking the walk. We need people who are walking the walk, not just pretending, not just talking about it, but doing the hard work and doing it. And so for any listeners out there who I think would need a sounding board, would need a voice of encouragement, I encourage you to call on Kristin, use her coaching, sign up for her classes. How would they do that, Kristin? I know you mentioned you have 75 whole, but you are always putting on workshops for women. How could people get involved in those? I love how you just find, you just bring people together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the mobilizer.
You truly are the mobilizer. So yeah, I would, please tell us how we could sign up for your events that you put on.
Well, in the show notes, I have a Facebook group. It's called Women of Wonder Warriors Arise, and a lot of times I'll post in that group. I might create an event. I do like First Friday in that group just for connection time. I do have a group coaching called Arising Warriors starting on November 1st, 2023, because that is my 2-year anniversary of being set free from Egypt. So there's that. And then, like I said, in the show notes, I have a website that can take you to it says New Wings Coaching. We could always chat and I can, just tell you more about my one-on-one coaching, any group coaching that's coming up. Cause some need one-on-one, some need more community-based, some need both. It really depends based on our conversation. First of all, if we're a good fit for each other, because that's not always the case. I'm not going to just work with somebody just to get paid too. So that's a whole other conversation.
That's the integrity that you carry. It's been an honor today, Kristin, to kind of sit with you in your story. And I just feel like, if there's one person out there who you would want to encourage, one person who's feeling trapped by the system, wanting to make a change, would you pray? I think, if you would pray us out, Kristin, today. You're so good at speaking to the one. I think it'd be a great way to wrap up today.
Well, I'll first start with, it's due time for you to soar with new wings. Now that's one of my favorite things to say in relation to my business. But truly, it's due time for you to soar. It's due time for you to take hold of what he has for you, because to soar, we just have to catch his wind. We don't need to flap. We don't need to strive. Just kind of sit back, rest. So I'm going to pray. Lord, thank you. Thank you for the one who's listening today, who is hearing this testimony of a girl who, kind of a nobody, if you want to put it that way, who is just, walking this out with the Lord and has been set free in what would look like radical ways. I've had some even say like, well, my testimony isn't like that. And I just want to remind you that we all have a testimony. We've all walked through the fire. We've all walked through, different circumstances, and through all of it, he has been with you. He's been with me. And if the circumstances that you're walking through right now aren't good, I want to remind you that God is good and that he's got you. And for those of you who are I mean, I have this, I always have this vision of the woman in the cubicle, like I was, the woman in the cubicle just crying out for more, that knows that there's more. I pray that, Lord, you would show her what a little glimpse of what that more is, so that would give her hope to stay free, to be set free, so that she can also set others free. And we thank you for the love and the grace and the mercy that you've poured out over this daughter's life and over the other daughters that are listening in today. I pray for keys of revelation to drop into their lap to help set them free. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Thanks so much, Kristin, for letting me be a part of your day here today. It was so fun.
Ah, goodness. I just am so thankful for you, my friend, as well. Like, you have been such a light in my life. And for those of you who, um, you need connection. I just want to remind you that you need connection in this day. Don't stay isolated. We need people in our lives that will speak into our but God said. And I'm so thankful, Amy, to have you in my life to remind me of my but God said. So, I love you, friend.
Love you too.
Keep speaking.
Bless you.
I'll be
Bye-bye.
back next week with another episode. Thanks, Hope Unlocked listeners.